Today, I'm speaking with an author and lecturer on the relationship between Christianity and the paranormal. He is a member of the Church's Fellowship for Psychical and Spiritual Studies, a 70-year-old Christian charity that promotes the integration of psychical and spiritual experiences within the Christian context. He is a member of the Survival Research Committee of the Society for Psychical Research. My guest has a master's degree in pioneering ministry Fresh Expressions from the University of Manchester and is the author of the best-selling book, The Invisible Dimension, Spirit Beings, Ghosts and the Afterlife. Here then, to speak with me today is Matt Arnold. Matt, welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's lovely that you're here.
Thank you for inviting me on the show, Nigel. It's great to be here.
Right, first of all, please, what is parapsychology?
So parapsychology is the scientific and philosophical study of anomalous experiences and phenomena that appear to transcend the ordinary limits of human perception, cognition, or even physical laws, as we currently understand through mainstream science.
So what kind of phenomena does it include?
Well, it includes things like extrasensory perception, which we call ESP, knowing information without the use of the known senses that we've got. It would be telepathy, mind-to-mind communication, clairvoyance or remote viewing, which is perceiving distant or hidden objects or events. It's precognition, knowledge of future events before they happen, retrocognition, knowledge of past events that couldn't have been known through the ordinary senses. But it also includes things like psychokinesis, the ability or the apparent ability of the mind to influence physical systems or objects without any physical interaction. Things like spoon bending, or moving objects, that's called macro PK, psychokinesis. Influencing random number generators is micro PK, and affecting biological systems. So things like healing would be classed as that. Survival-related phenomena, so looking at how human consciousness survives bodily death, so near-death experiences, apparitions and hauntings, mediumship, reincarnation, memories, especially in young children, instrumental transcommunication, so ITC, which should be through electronic devices, the sort of things you see on these ghost hunting teleprograms. And it also looks at altered states of consciousness, so things like meditation, trance, hypnosis, dreams, and even looks at psychedelics, how they may affect our experiences and how our consciousness interacts with reality.
So there's so much, isn't there? So much that occupies your energy and your time and your interest. I want to delve into some of those as we chat today. The other thing I'd just like to be clear: what does psychic mean? Because we hear about that being used as an adjective, but also being used as a noun. Somebody is a psychic, or they have gifts of being a psychic. What does it mean?
Well, it depends on, as you say, how it's used. Psychic can be one of those trigger words, especially for Christians, because we've grown up thinking that psychic only relates to occult phenomena. It's something that is only ever evil. When actually psychic, when we look at the root of the word, psyche comes from the Greek, which actually means soul, and it's used in the New Testament quite a bit. So we've got all of these words that have deeper meanings that actually mean something within a Christian context as well. So it's about using those extrasensory things that we just currently don't understand within the scientific community, and it's using them to help somebody or help ourselves. Sometimes it is, or it's being sensitive to our surroundings and things that we are not aware of through our physical senses. For instance, our intuition we could class as a psychical phenomena. So psychic really is to do with those, I would say, soul gifts that we've got, not the spiritual gifts, but the soul gifts that everybody has, because we've all got souls, but we just don't tend to focus on them, especially as we get older, because for some reason we just get told that they aren't things that we should focus on.
And we're going to talk about instances of such phenomena in the Bible in a few moments' time. But let's speak personally. You've been involved in this area of study for some years now. So have you actually ever experienced a psychic phenomena? Have you seen a ghost? Have you been to a seance, visited a medium?
Well, let's first say I have never been to a seance. I've never visited a medium. I know what goes on in them. I know I have studied in terms of, I'm also a bit of a magician, an illusionist. So I've seen how Houdini used to go and explore how mediums, especially in the 18 and early 1900s, were operating, and he was deliberately trying to find out if they were using fakery and that sort of thing. But I've never been to one of those. I have experienced a fair number of psychic phenomena myself. For instance, I used to work in a local mining village where I live now, and I set up a local community orchard, and on my own in there, we just finished setting up some willow domes. We're just picking up the pieces. Sun had set behind, beautiful, and then suddenly I got a hug from something unseen, and that inner voice that said thank you. So okay, I'm going to hold on to that. That's a positive thing. In my book, The Invisible Dimension, at the back, there's a story of when my car radio decided to play some music that I'd never heard before, and it was straight after I'd offered up the peace of Christ in that place where the manager had said there was a dark presence. And the track that I've discovered afterwards, I'd not played it at that point, I'd downloaded it but not played it, was Depeche Mode's Peace, which I thought, oh, that's timely. I've walked into my first real phenomena that I think I had that I can remember personally was walking into a room and getting the sense of get out. It was like walking into electric jelly. And it transpired afterwards that I found out later that somebody had been playing with Ouija in that place. Now, as a rational scientist, I would have, if I'd have known beforehand, I would have said, oh, well, I was psychologically primed for that. But because I didn't know that story at the start and I had that sense of get out, then I thought, well, there's something to this. When I was a child, my mother told me that I used to see a little old man in my chair. My dad, who was a psychiatric nurse, said, oh, it's an imaginary friend. My mom was freaked out by it. My nan said, maybe it's your granddad who died a couple of years before I was born. I don't know. I've had something dark appear at the foot of my bed, which required some heavy-duty spiritual domestos, as I called it. Um, and I'm known as Slow Cooker Matt by a lot of my friends in this paranormal community for several instances of when I was in the vicarage in the village that I was at, where the slow cooker would turn itself off at the plug socket on the switch on the wall. And we know that we had turned it on because the stuff was half cooked. But there was nobody in the house. I'd gone out, my kids were at school, my wife was out at her work. So that happened a couple of times with chicken, but it didn't happen with any other meat, which was a bit weird. And then I've got many others that I've kind of.
So what I'm hearing is actually you've had an array of maybe unexplicable or strange happenings in your life. It's no wonder that you want to actually go and find the reason as to what's happening. It's no wonder you've given your life study to the paranormal and how it connects with Christianity. And here's the thing, Matt. Here's the thing. Is it a case of what some people call paranormal is what a Christian would call spiritual or supernatural, or are they two different things? For example, there's lots of talk these days about angels, not least because of Robbie Williams' song. But, somebody who is a Christian might regard reading about angels, and we're coming up to Christmas, and we should be reading about angels. These are spiritual, supernatural beings. Whereas somebody else might say, oh, yeah, but they're paranormal entities. So how do we distinguish between supernatural and paranormal?
We often get these words very confused, and it's because we want to try and sanitize our experiences by saying supernatural can only be good things and paranormal is evil things. They're used interchangeably by folk, but there are very distinct differences in what they mean if you break up the words into the component parts. So, for instance, paranormal, para means alongside. And so therefore it is alongside the normal. It's alongside the natural creation. So it's things that are alongside the normal. And so, you think of it as a parallel track or dimension, things which we can't currently explain in science, that we might be able to one day explain. They are part of the creation. So that would include angels. They are part of the creation as well. They weren't uncreated beings, they are created beings. So I would say that angels were paranormal encounters. Hauntings, ESP, psychokinesis, all of those things that I mentioned before that we often label as occult because we don't know fully how they work yet. And in the same way as a mobile phone and even talking to you in the studio from hundreds of miles away would be classed as paranormal if we went back 300 years ago and I told somebody that I could talk to somebody in real time and see them. I might end up getting hanged as a witch or burnt at the stake for that sort of thing. So that's what we mean really by paranormal, the invisible dimension, the unseen realm, the spiritual realms that are part of the created order. So technically natural. Whereas supernatural, super means above or beyond nature. Now only God is above or beyond the created order. So supernatural is the realm of the theological or metaphysical. It's a transcendent order that exists outside of our created order and which science can't explain by very definition that it's outside of the laws of science as we understand it. So supernatural things would be God and the miracles that God performs that require the suspension of the laws of nature to accomplish their purposes. So I would say that Christians should consider themselves as spiritual, definitely. If there aren't, then there's a problem with our faith. But many Christians have been told that the paranormal is evil, so we call that stuff paranormal, whereas the good stuff supernatural.
Now, many Christians would as you've said yourself, you would never go to certain events, certain um, spiritual events, such as a tarot reading, such as a séance, such as going to a medium. Um, are these absolutely out of bounds to Christians?
Right, okay. So my advice is don't mess with this stuff if you don't know what you're doing. And even if you do know what you're doing, um, caution is because when we think about it, if we were to put a big welcome sign in neon lights above our front door, leave the door open and say, all welcome, we wouldn't do that in the physical because that would be crazy. Why would we do it in the realm that we don't know very much at all about at this stage of our existence? So I wouldn't mess about with that sort of stuff. I have myself been involved in Christian ministry in psychic fairs. So I was part of a team called Journey into Wholeness that went into a local psychic fair as a Christian ministry. And we had contextualized materials that were written in the language of the people that we were speaking to rather than just standard Christian text, because a lot of people that came to us were Christians or had been Christians and had abandoned the faith because they didn't feel that it was spiritual enough for them. So I've sat alongside a tarot reader in the next booth and listened in. Myself, I am confident in who I am and whose I am. I am Christ's, and greater is in me that is he that is in me than is in the world. So I purchased a box of tarot to be able to see exactly what this was all about because, it was almost like being Paul in Athens in Acts 17, where he went about and saw all of the different spiritual places and he found an altar to the unknown God. So he listened to what was going on and then he was able to perceive God was already speaking to people in those places through those things and be able to reveal the God that we know as the God of the Bible, the God, the Almighty Creator. But he never uses the Hebrew Bible in any of his sermon on Acts 17 at all, which is quite interesting. He uses pagan philosophers and teachings, but he never uses the Bible as such. And so I looked at the tarot and I'm thinking, oh, I've got cards here that have a lot of Christian imagery in it. This is crazy. So I went online and found a book called oh, I can't remember. It was a book by John Drain that is Beyond Prediction. That was what it was called, Beyond Prediction by John Drain, Clifford and Ross. And they're all theological trained authors, one of whom his books are actually part of the staple reading of vicars. And they unpacked the altar to the unknown God of tarot and showed how the images in there can actually point to Christ and the gospel message. Having learnt that, I was then able to go to a friend's house where they got some tarot on the table and was actually, do you know what you're reading? And was able to reveal the gospel message through that. So that was, we have to be careful. We don't go into these things without being properly trained, without properly being aware of what we're doing. These are what I would call meaty topics for Christians rather than sort of like lightweight, fluffy stuff.
Absolutely, and it sounds very much like it's a specialist ministry.
Yes.
What I'm hearing you say is that, look, yes, let's be aware, everyone, every Christian should be aware that there are these things around. We actually don't need too much convincing, because you go past many a pub and it'll say it's got a tarot night or it's got a psychic reading night or whatever. And we turn on our telly and we've got haunted house programs and we've got all sorts of things happening there. Many movies are fascinated by this subject, of course. But what I'm also hearing you say is it's a bit like the advice of Jesus, be as harmless as doves, but as wise as serpents.
Yes.
And it takes a spiritual discernment to know, not only to be able to see the sort of, as it were, the source of these phenomena, whether it is of light or whether it is of darkness, whether it is of God or whether it is not of God. And then it also takes the conviction, and a lengthy conviction, I would suspect, of saying, well, is this a kind of a ministry for me? I'm not hearing you say, everybody go out and buy tarot cards and get yourself educated.
No,
Is that right?
no, definitely not. No, no, it is a specialist thing. And it is for those that have a calling to this, and you have to know your calling. This is something that I grew up absolutely convinced was totally evil, wouldn't be involved in it at all. And it's only after actually spending time sitting at the feet of Jesus and listening to where my calling was, that I was able to say, and I wasn't doing it on my own. I was doing it alongside other parachurch. It was a parachurch group, so there were lots of other people with similar interests that were involved in this, all covering it in prayer.
Thank you, Matt. I am talking with parapsychologist Matt Arnold here on Questions of Our Times, brought to you in association with the Christian Evidence Society. And now we have a message.
Mike Claire.
Okay.
Mike Claire, you can talk.
Thank you.
If you have a question you'd like to ask, you can send them over by email to studio@premier.org.uk.
Doing well, Matt.
Also text
You okay?
I'm conscious I do
your message
speak
Premier.
a little bit fast, but
Don't forget
there's
to
so
include
much
your
to
first
get in.
name
Just
and where you're
relax.
messaging
Just be
from.
normal. Don't worry.
Texts are
It's all good.
charged at your
It's all
usual
good.
network standard
You wait till we
rate.
have the quick fire round with the
You can
listeners'
also send
questions,
us a
because we've got
message
loads.
via text or
Oh,
voice note
It'll sound like an
on
auction.
WhatsApp on 0303
Okay.
04
Will you be
1000.
saying them, or
That's
will they be
0303
coming
No,
in?
they come to me and I ask them.
Okay.
Unless we get any phone-ins.
Okay.
Are we sounding okay,
Questions of Our
Ione?
Times with Nigel Bovey in association with the Christian Evidence Society.
Premier Christian Radio, your voice of hope.
You're listening to Questions of Our Times with Nigel Bovey.
Hello and welcome back. I'm talking with Matt Arnold, a Christian parapsychologist, about all things paranormal. Just a few days after Halloween, it seemed a timely occasion to do so. So our question today, and Questions of Our Times, is brought to you in association with the Christian Evidence Society. Our question today is, do things really go bump in the night? In other words, are things like ghosts, poltergeists, and mischievous pixies real? And as such, are they evidence that a spiritual world exists? So, Matt, are they real? And is any kind of evidence that there's a spirit world?
Well, we've got a Bible that's packed full of spiritual things. So that's, as a Christian, I'd go, yeah, there's definitely a spiritual world out there. But I love this Cornish litany, which reads as follows: from ghosties and ghoulies and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night, good Lord, deliver us. So, and we've got a rich tradition of the paranormal within Christian history, with ghostly apparitions and poltergeist phenomena, whether it's PK of the living or phenomena of the departed, that's up for debate. Mischievous pixies, I guess you've not read the Elves and the Shoemaker, where the diminutive little paranormal beings are actually really quite helpful. So some people, we don't know. I think if they do exist, they've got free will and agency like the rest of creation, and as such could be good or badly behaved according to the free will that's bestowed upon them. In the Bible, we've got a number of words for spirit beings that were considered by the original writers of the texts to be the spirits of the departed, ghosts. So we've got the Itzim, we've got the Rephaim, which were the noble dead, we've got the Ove, We've got the unclean spirit, the pneuma akathartos. We've got the ruach. We've got even the word daimon, which in Greek at the time meant one of three things: gods of the nations, intermediary beings between the gods and humans, and the spirit of a departed human. So in Mark 1 and 5, we see the unclean spirit and daimon used for the same entity. Various biblical dictionaries say that the most common usage of the Greek culture for daimon was a departed human spirit. So they didn't have necessarily the negative associations given to it by later Christianity at that point. And then we've got many reports of angels visiting folk in the Bible and throughout the Christian history as well, which are considered evidence of the spiritual world. And then later, although there are recordings of these near-death experiences from about 300 BC with Plato's Republic having a near-death experience, the first recorded one that we've got. But the Bible itself, you could read Psalm 23, which is one of those funereal psalms, as actually information that's come back from somebody who knows about the spiritual realm, the valley of the shadow of death that you go into, and the pastures, the green pastures and the still waters, which were all part of the geography of the underworld that they understood at the time, so the afterlife. We've got out-of-body experiences. We've got after-death communications. You know, Moses talking with Jesus at the Transfiguration in Matthew 17. All of those contribute to the vast evidence of the spiritual realm that's just bubbling beyond, underneath our present reality. And the world is stranger than we think, but actually our thinking shouldn't be strange.
The world is stranger than we think. Our thinking shouldn't be strange. Yeah, because if I flick through the Bible and I see some actually crazy things going on, an axe head floats. How does that happen? You know, Peter in Acts, he heals by his shadow.
Yes.
People bring handkerchiefs and aprons to Paul, and they are healed. You know, Elijah raises a dead boy. You know, I mean, the Bible is full of these unusual experiences, aren't they? Which theologians in some places call miracles, or John refers to them as signs. So it shouldn't come as any great surprise that there's lots going on in an unseen world. So, Matt, my next question is, to what extent of all these things, not only within the Bible, but also some of the things that you personally have experienced and some of the things that are happening in our society and culture today, this interest in the paranormal, how much would you say that is evidence for the existence of God?
Well, God himself has placed eternity in our hearts. We have a spiritual vacuum that is God-shaped, as some of our Christian forebearers have said. And I would say that they are more evidence that there are spiritual entities that are alive and active. Now, God runs a bureaucracy, just like he entrusts mission to the church. There are, other things that he entrusts to other parts of his created order as well. And if you were a first century Christian or intertestamental Jew, you would have understood that there would have been angels that would have been in charge of various bits of creation. So, and the church throughout its history has understood this to be part of God's mission to the rest of the world. We've had angelic help stories that have come through to missionaries. I've had angelic help myself, I believe, when I was lost on the island of Cyprus once with my family. So with all of these encounters that we've got, and the encounters recorded in Scripture and modern day accounts, I'd say these beings are active. They're either aligned with the will of God or against it.
Now, we've just come past Halloween, and of course, it's a long-established Christian tradition, even though these days it's overtaken with trick-or-treaters. 1st of November is All Saints' Day, when the church commemorates the lives of Christian martyrs. In some denominations, the 2nd of November is All Souls' Day, when prayers are made for the souls of the faithful departed. Every day of the year, some Christians pray to saints. Are these examples of Christians trying to communicate with the dead?
Well, this is one of these crazy things that we talk about communication with the dead, and we see that as a completely evil thing. And we're thrown 1 Samuel 28 as being, this is the example of what happens if you communicate with the dead. You try and bring up Samuel and you end up dying the next day. But yet Scripture has Jesus talking to the dead Lazarus. He has Peter talking to a dead girl, and Jesus himself speaks to the long dead Moses at the Mount of Transfigurations. So I think what I take it though, you're asking the question, should we initiate contact with the dead? And again, this doesn't seem to be as cut and dried as often as we taught in the church. The issue is all about intention. So if you intend to seek knowledge about the future, fame or fortune, or it's for self-promotional purposes, then no, we shouldn't be treating the dead like that. For one thing, it's totally disrespectful to treat folk like that in life. So why should we do it with those who've passed on? However, I don't have so much concerns about speaking to those who have passed on with what the church calls the unquiet dead. Now, I'm part of the Midlands Deliverance Forum, so I work alongside deliverance ministers in the Midlands region, and we know that we have had encounters with what we would call the unquiet dead who are seeking peace. So, and this is something that has been in the Christian tradition for nearly 2,000 years, that the dead that haven't got their rest in Christ, I think it was Augustine said that our hearts are not at rest until they find their rest in you, O Lord. And the unclean spirit doesn't find rest, as Jesus said. It goes through dry and arid places and then returns with 7 other more evil spirits than itself. So I would offer, and I have done, offered the peace of Christ to places where there is what we perceive as a spirit of a person that is willing to want to change. And this is, I mean, on my website, I've got the story of Johann Blumhardt, who did something very much similar when he was speaking, and he discerned, and he said, Lord, I don't want to know anything more than the absolute minimum that is required to help this soul to find peace. So in terms of Jesus himself went down into Hades to preach to the dead, according to 1 Peter 3:18 to 4:6, and other early Christian writings in the tradition, it is called the harrowing of Hades or the harrowing of hell. Jesus spoke to the unclean spirits. So if I intend to seek the peace of someone who's passed over and to bring peace to those in the flesh who are being disturbed by certain things happening because of it, then offering the message of reconciliation to God through Christ is what many Christian ministers have done for many, many centuries. And even Samuel Wesley spoke to the poltergeist that was affecting his family at Epworth. But in terms of praying for the departed, this has been part of the Christian ministry since its inception, and in Judaism, way before that. If we see in the book of Maccabees, 2 Maccabees 12, where Judas Maccabees collects alms to send to the temple so that the priests will pray for the dead soldiers. Now, because he does that, we know that that technique, that thing, prayer for the dead, would have been something that was practiced in the temple. And the Christian catacombs in Rome have prayers for the dead, enlisting, asking God to pray for the living as well as praying for the dead. And if we've ever said rest in peace or God rest their soul, you've actually prayed for the departed, whether you want to accept it or not.
Yeah. And some academic research has actually pointed out, or suggests rather, that a bereaved person going to see a medium can help in the grief process, much akin to seeing a grief counsellor. Now, how indicative is this fascination with the paranormal and wanting to reach out to somebody who's departed? How much is this an indication of innate spiritual hunger that everybody has? And if it is an indication that people are longing for truth, what kind of challenge is that to Christians?
Well, recently the British Folklore Society did a survey on people's attitudes towards the paranormal and contacting the departed and that. And over 30% of people in the UK believe that that is a possibility. I myself lost my mum 2.5 years ago, and I went through the grief process, but it was only when I had a voicemail on my phone, and this was just maybe a month afterwards. I had a voicemail on my phone from somebody, and then I thought, oh, I wonder if I've got a voicemail from my mum still saved somewhere. And so I went back through, and I hadn't. And I've absolutely hit rock bottom, and I can completely understand why people would want to hear from their departed. loved ones. I'd never understood it before. I can understand it. I don't recommend actively going to try and do it myself. I myself last September, had a dream. I was in a very, very, very low place, very, very depressed. I'm quite a proud person, and I don't want to go and see a doctor about depression. And I'd given up at that point, and I said to my wife, look, I'm going to go and see the doctor. That night, I had a dream whereby I actually met my mum. I didn't I didn't initiate it. I met her. I was able to speak to her, to tell her I loved her. I was able to give her the most massive hug. I woke up straight after and I could still feel that hug. And for me, that completely lifted me out of that, completely changed it. So I don't seek communication from my mum. I pray for my mum every day, that she will move deeper into God's love and awareness of his mission still for her, because Gregory of Nyssa, the ancient church father, said that we are on a perpetual journey into God. And Jesus himself said that there are many mansions in his Father's house. Well, the word mansion in our translation we think of as being a destination, but actually the Greek is monai, and I've got some bad news. It means motel. It's a traveler's rest. It's a caravansary on the journey that we from day to day journey, and it's a place of refreshment. So we still have a journey in the afterlife as well. So I think, in my understanding, I can understand why people will want to go and get these communications. I wouldn't force it. I would let it happen in its own natural way. And I think that's the best way to let God decide whether it's what you need at the time that you've got.
Matt, thank you, and thank you for being open and candid with us. And I know that many listeners will sympathise and empathise with your experience in this this area. It's something that many of us have gone through, and most of us will have to go through it in due course. In the New Testament, John says, "Test the spirits to see whether they are from God." Now, this suggests to me that John thinks that not all spirits are from God. So, are paranormal phenomena evil? Are they good? Are they neutral? Or don't we need to worry at all?
It depends upon where the source of this phenomena is coming from. If it's from God, if it's from those that are aligned with the purposes of God, then I wouldn't worry about those things. Test the fruit of this. When John says, test the spirits, for not all come from God, it implies that some do come from God. And so we have to have that discernment. We take our experience to God. Has it brought an increase in love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control? Has it brought an increase in any of those? Because if it is, Galatians says there's no law against this. So when we have these spontaneous encounters that aren't manufactured, we should be going and saying, is this of God? What are the fruits of this? Because if the fruits are good, then give thanks to God.
Right, we have thank you, Matt, so much. We have some listener questions coming in immediately. Now, if you would like to add to the conversation today, please get in touch. You are listening at the moment to Questions of Our Times. I'm Major Nigel Bovey of the Christian Evidence Society, and I'm talking about a Christian response to the paranormal with parapsychologist Matt Arnold. Now, if you have a question on the many topics that Matt has raised today, you can contact us by email on studio@premier.org.uk. You can text 66777, making the first word of your message Premier. Please include your first name and where you're from, and texts are charged and calls are charged at your usual network rate. Please remember to ask the bill player for their permission first. You can also message via text or voice note on WhatsApp. Our number is 0303 040 1000. Or you can lift the old-fashioned telephone and you can call on 0845 021 21 21. But you'll have to be quick because there's lots in the queue, but don't let it be like the school disco where everybody gets brave with 2 minutes to go. So let's go to listener number one is Peter from Southampton. Okay, and Matt, this is quick fire, okay? There's lots here. Right. Peter says it's presumably one thing to say some paranormal phenomena are real rather than fake, and another thing to say what underlying reality explains it. For example, whether there is a psychic power of the human mind or some supernatural power beyond the human mind, such as a demon. How does parapsychology handle the second of this?
Okay, so we are straying into what I would call the devil or the demon of the gaps, where we're trying to say that what we don't understand must be only evil because we don't have a biblical understanding of it at this stage, or a scientific understanding of it at this stage. Again, test everything. Test everything, because if we don't, then we are guilty of not obeying 1 John 1 verse 4. And by labeling paranormal as evil, this is often why we have had so many people leave the church. During World War One, at the end of World War One, lots of people lost their loved ones. They were having apparitions and visitations of their loved ones. They were going to their vicars and their church ministers and asking, why have I had this apparition? And they were either being pathologized, it's all in the mind, demonized, it must be an apparition of the devil or an impersonating spirit, or the folks were ignored and brushed under the carpet. And as a result of that, the Christian church lost a lot of people to the spiritualist church. And so, spiritualism is one of the unpaid bills of the church because we've failed to listen to it. It's why the Church's Fellowship for Psychical and Spiritual Studies was formed in 1953 after the same thing happened in World War II as well.
Thank you. William, then, from Portsmouth, do you think parapsychology and theology can throw light on each other? Can these two disciplines, how does that work?
Well, parapsychology can actually provide a scientific basis for some of the phenomena that we can see in the Bible. And we can say, yes, these things are real. They are experiences that we have. We can confirm them. They might be spontaneous, but they're throughout the entire body, the corpus of information that we have, reports of this. Yeah, what's in the Bible seems to actually make a lot of sense with what we are seeing today as well. And the same with the Bible, we can actually say, well, the theology can give meaning to these experiences. That's what parapsychology lacks at the moment. It's actually having some meaning to them. We're just interested in what's going on as opposed to why it's going on, which is what I believe Christianity can provide.
Thank you. Edward from Norwich. This is a good one. Well, I mean, not that the others weren't. Sorry. Sorry, folks from the South Coast. Why do some places seem to be paranormal hotspots? Is it because of what's happened there in the past, or is it something else? Because it's true, isn't it? Some parts of the country are known for psychic phenomena.
Yes, I mean, so one of the people that I'm really quite interested in is a guy called Walter Wink, who wrote a book called The Powers That Be, or a trilogy of books as well. And he said that he called them the angels of the place, where a work practice or a workplace or a place where sin is encouraged, where things that are demeaning to human life happen, or a lot of killing happens. These places somehow seem to have an angel of the place that kind of comes in, as it were, as like a beacon that is attracted. Now you can do the same thing where you've got places like Lindisfarne, Holy Island, where it's soaked in prayer. The saints have been there. It's a place of pilgrimage and it's a holy place. And the Bible's got holy places at the top of mountains. The cosmic geography of the Hebrews was at the top of the mountains where God lives, and the valleys were nearer to the underworld, and they were where all of that lived. So I would say that there is, and I will use the word psychic, there is some sort of imprint that seems to go on the land. It says if you sin on the land, it will spit you out. And so it seems that that's what the scriptures say. And it seems that if there is sin abounds in a place, it acts as kind of like a hive of negativity of that which is not aligned with God to flourish. Whereas if you've got you've got different types of hauntings as well. Some are recordings, which could be just time bubbles. We just don't know what that is. Non-interactive stuff. Or you could have a place where I know a friend on Lindisfarne who said that I think it was Aidan. She heard Aidan and saw Aidan, St. Aidan, and he said, "We've always been here."
So,
So,
so link with that then. It could it be because something horrendous has happened there? I mean, a friend of mine, he refuses to drive through a particular part of a particular town because years ago there used to be what was then known as a lunatic asylum, and dreadful things happened to people. And whenever he has driven through, he just feels cold, and it is just a sense, and he doesn't go there anymore. So is that the kind of thing we're talking about?
I mean, it can be his own intuition, his own psychic sensitivity to this that's picking it up. And this is where I walked into that room and had that experience
Mm.
myself. I would say that maybe we should treat that as a, rather than avoid, we go in and pray and we try and reconcile what's gone on to God.
Okay, thank you. Again, going back to an earlier question, here's one from Tom at St Albans. Could God ever use paranormal experiences to draw people to himself? Or do such experiences always come from the dark side?
Well, again, this is the word paranormal. We've so conditioned ourselves that paranormal means anti-God, against God, when the Bible is filled with paranormal experiences. You've floating axe heads. You've got Elisha, who I call the psychic prophet. He sees remotely what's going on in the king's bedroom. Mary, the Annunciation is because of a paranormal phenomena with the visitation of the angels. So we've got to kind of say the paranormal is a neutral thing that can be used by positive or negative forces. We have to discern. And, paranormal means alongside the natural world. It's still part of the creation. We just don't understand it yet.
Thank you. Will in Dorset is speaking from personal experience, as you have been today, Matt. I did Ouija several times as a kid. I've suffered schizophrenia for 36 years and often wonder if it's related. Please pray for me. Could there be a connection between getting involved in paranormal phenomena and that affecting one's mental health?
Whoa, right, okay. I am not a mental health expert, so I wouldn't know what the biophysical things, biochemical things are going on inside a person's mind in that situation. I am reminded of Mark 5 with the guy who was possessed by Legion, and part of my research for my master's thesis was what was going on behind the scenes in that situation. And it does appear that this guy had become psychically sensitive, or was psychically sensitive, and hanging around in places of death, which was in a something that not advised. But even in the midrash, the Jewish midrash, it advises don't sleep in a graveyard. So I would say that I can't comment on that, whether it came from his experience. What I would say is don't mess with that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Thank you. A couple more coming in now from Emma in Southampton. And we've got a couple of minutes left before we need to wrap up this lovely time we shared together. Emma says, when a Christian has spontaneous experience of something outside of a normal Christian doctrine, church pastors often do not respond very well, suggesting that these things are bad. What could be done to re-educate the church to help them embrace the wider gifts that some Christians experience but feel they should remain silent about?
Well, this is why I wrote The Invisible Dimension, to help people understand things like the afterlife and how it evolves in the scriptures, rather than just being a monolithic block of information that came out right at the start, that was fully formed. It actually develops over time. So that's my own book, The Invisible Dimension. There's a book by a guy called Matthew Maguire, called A Magical World. He's a Christian writer as well, and he looks at psychical phenomena from a very Christian perspective, deeply referenced, to help But also the Church's Fellowship for Psychical and Spiritual Studies existed for 70 years to be able to help Christians who have had these experiences, who don't have a safe place to talk about these things, and as a result are confused. So there are Christian organizations out there, the CFPSS being one of them, and is a very, very well respected, very sensible and biblically based group.
Last question, very brief answer, please. This is from Toshin in Wembley. The Bible says it is appointed for man to die once, and after that the judgment. Doesn't that cancel out the idea that people who are dead can interact with living people if they have already experienced judgment? Cool, let's finish on a high. Come on.
Okay, very quickly. First off, the word "the" is inserted into that biblical translation. The definite article before judgment doesn't exist in the original Greek. So it's just as it is appointed for man once to die, and after that judgment. And then the sentence continues into verse 28. So we've just cherry-picked that to prove a particular point. It's proof texting. So we see from near-death experiences, one of the major features is a judgment that we have, a self-life review, which we see in the books opened in Revelation 20, but also in the Apocalypse of Zephaniah, chapter 6 and 7, which is pseudepigraphal, but it's still an insight. It's like a commentary on Jewish beliefs at the time. Lots and lots of ancient belief systems also there's a judgment when you die that determines your starting point within the afterlife. So that doesn't cancel out anything at all. In fact, it actually shows that there is a judgment. It does affect it, but that's not the end of it, because we don't have the final judgment. The word final in front of that means there's got to be at least a judgment before, which is what Hebrews 9:27 is talking about.
Thank you. My guest today here on Questions of Our Times has been author and Christian parapsychologist Matt Arnold. At the same time next week, my guest will be the Reverend Dr. Helen Painter of the Bristol Baptist College, when we will be discussing the question, why does God cause bloodshed? And I hope you'll be able to join me. Questions of Our Times is brought to you by the Christian Evidence Society. To catch up on this or any of the 4 previous series, please visit christianevidence.org or premier.plus and type in Questions of Our Times. Until we meet again, may the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. Thank you for listening.